Hello, my name's Andy May. I'm here with Apex Benefits. I want to cover some housekeeping items real quick before we turn it over to Tim. All attendees will be in listen only mode for the duration of the webinar. For questions or comments, please use the chat box located in the right-hand side of your webinar screen. We do encourage you to ask questions throughout the presentation, and we will cover these at the end. For audio access, attendees can use computer audio or call in using the phone option. Presentation slides and resources can be downloaded by clicking the icon on the right-hand side of the webinar screen. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Tim Elkin from Delta Dental, who's going to kind of give us some dental 101 that you can use to navigate your employee benefits, your dental benefits.
Perfect. Thank you, Andy. My name is Tim Elkin, account executive with Delta Dental. Essentially, it's a fancy word for sales guy. So I work with all new business. As Andy mentioned, any questions you guys have throughout the presentation, I'm just going to cover understanding your dental benefits 101. Won't dive too deeply into the weeds, but we'll just talk to you about your preventative, basic, and major services and how those work for you and your employees' plan. Sorry. Again, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this, but what I wanted to point out to you all is when you see a Delta Dental contract or a principal or a Guardian or MetLife, you're going to see this, and your folks at Apex will help you dive into these. But these are going to be your standard coverages that fall underneath these categories. Again, under preventative, these are going to be covered at 100%. Generally, you're not paying anything out of pocket if you go in network, and also there's no deductible for preventative services. Once you get into minor, which is basic services, you will tend to see that deductible. Normally, it's a $50 deductible times 3 for family, so up to $150. But you're only going to see the deductibles with an in-network provider for your basic and your major services. Again, I'm happy to go into detail on any of these that you'd like me to cover, but these are what you're going to see in a standard contract with a Delta Dental or one of our competitors' plans.
So Tim, one of the things that I noticed on the slide is it references an allowance of 2 per calendar year. Is it always something that's related to a calendar year, or is there a different schedule with that?
That's a good question. To your point is it could be 1 per calendar year, or it could be 1 per 6 months, or 1 per calendar year. So you got to make sure you're looking at that contract. And then to your point also, like with the bite wing x-rays, those are 1 per 365 or 1 per calendar year. So if you visited on February 1st, you wouldn't be eligible for that x-ray again until January 30th the following year. So good question. Another thing you're going to see on there is the implants. Make sure when you're reviewing your contract, we cover that as a standard. Implants are included. If we take over a group from another carrier, implants are not covered. We'll match the current carrier. But historically, we're going to cover implants in our plan under the major services.
Excellent. Now, I noticed that when we talk about network coverage, I've been told that, or we always advise our clients, if you're going to have an expensive dental procedure performed, they should have a predetermination of benefits done. Can you explain what a predetermination of benefits is?
Absolutely. So again, when you have your health plan, you go into the dentist's office or the ortho office, you're going to give them your ID card or social security number. The dentist will be able to look your information up. They'll actually tell you, hey, we're going to go through with a crown or with a bridge or through the ortho treatment. They will send that over to the health plan, to Delta Dental, to Guardian, to Met, whoever it might be. So the dentist will work in coordination with the dental plan, and they will tell you, hey, based on your current coverage, your deductible, where your annual max is, they'll show you what that estimate is going to cost for that actual procedure.
And will it also let you know whether it's covered or not?
It will.
Okay.
And again, stress if you can, try to see an in-network provider because you're going to get the best benefit with an in-network dentist versus an out-of-network dentist. And we'll cover that some more when we go through the actual plan designs. Answer your question. Good. And actually, if you all, Josh, if you could pull up the plan summary. Perfect. So if you have, what you have in front of you here is a Delta Dental plan. You'll see this from our other competitors as well. But what I wanted to just point out to you is here's how the benefits fall, what category did they fall under, and how the actual plan would work. As I mentioned earlier, on the diagnostic and preventative, again, if you're in network, you should pay nothing for those services. So diagnostic, preventative, those are going to be covered 100% for in-network. Basic services is where that deductible is going to come into play. To Andy's point, if you're going for basic service, you could still do a predetermination of benefits on that. But normally you're going to pay a $50 deductible or $25 deductible, whatever your deductible is, and then you pay up to the annual max at 80% for these services. So you're going to see your periodontics, endodontics in your plan. Those could be under basic or major. Our standard is the perio and endo benefits are going to be covered under basic. But again, you're going to see the deductibles come into play for basic, and then major services, crowns, bridges, implants. Again, you're going to be paying the deductible on those, but this is going to fall at that 50% category. Again, your plan could change. It could be 180/50, 180/60, but this is standardly what we see with our dental plans. Ortho, this is going to be separate from your annual max. So you'll have your annual max for your plan, which could be $1,000 or $1,500. Your ortho is going to fall separate from that. Again, that can fluctuate from $1,000 up to $2,000 depending on what your annual ortho or lifetime max is, and those are separate from your annual max from the preventative or basic and major services.
I have a quick question. You
Yes, sir.
referenced your $50 deductible for basic services and your $50 for major services. Are there two separate deductibles there's one for basic and one for major, or is it a combined deductible normally?
It is a combined. So you'll pay one deductible per service. So if you go in, you satisfy your $50 deductible on basic, you're not going to have to hit that again on major. But if you have family members, up to 3 times that family member. So if you got a family of 3, employee will pay the 50, spouse will pay the 50, and the child will pay the 50 for the basic or major services.
What if I have additional children?
They would not pay the 50. If you hit the $150
Yeah.
3 times cap, they're not paying deductible. Good question. So on that second page of the document, this then talks about your maximum payment. So this is a $1,500 per person per calendar year. That's the basic, major, and your diagnostic preventative. Even though you're not paying out of pocket for those services if you're in network, that amount that is going to the dentist will go towards your annual max on this plan in particular. And then on here, we're showing $1,000 per person lifetime on orthodontia. So you can have either the same annual out-of-pocket max, or ortho could be different. So it just depends on how you and the employer and your consultant sets that up. And then again, you see the deductible here, 50 times 3 for the $150 family deductible.
What percentage of people actually end up hitting their annual maximum?
Surprisingly, it's not that high. To the annual max, when we see our plans, historically, the annual max, like if you look at a benchmark, has been about that $1,000 annual max. We've actually seen that bump up to about $1,500. So I'd say our block of business is in that $1,250 annual max. It is a low percentage. It's under 10% of folks that will actually see that annual max exposure. So a lot of times when employers are building these plans, we do try to say, hey, $1,000 great, $1,500 is probably it's a good spot to start. For folks looking at that $2,000, $3,000, we will show you that benchmark, and we just don't see a lot of the employees or their family members ever capping out at that annual max of $1,500 plus. Good question.
Then on the lifetime maximum for orthodontia, I've seen clients that have added adult orthodontia coverage. And I was surprised that when adult orthodontia has been added, it doesn't increase the rates very much. Is that something that's common?
It is true. I don't know if it's the fact that adults aren't going in to get those treatments, but we'll see it spread around 3% to the premium when you want to include adult ortho. And you'll see that cap, it'll say, 99 years or no max. So we do see it often, but it really doesn't increase the premium that much.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions on the actual plan designs? Any questions from the audience?
The only question I have here is, I didn't get my implant covered. How do I look into that?
So the question was, I did not get my implant covered. How do I look into that? Well, I'll take a little bit of a stab at this. Mm-hmm. So you obviously want to look at the contract that is currently in place to confirm that implants are a viable coverage that you have. The other thing is, and this is part of the reason we recommend having a predetermination of benefits performed, because if you did have predetermination of benefits and implant coverage wasn't available, the dentist would be notified and you would be notified, correct?
Correct.
But it could also be that coverage is available, but you don't meet the medical necessity to have the implant put in, which is also a possibility with the predetermination of benefits, correct?
Correct. And then a step further, most of these contracts with implants, they'll say one every 5 years. So if it came into the place where that implant is being replaced within that 5 year window, that could be another possibility. But again, we'll happily answer your question at the end if you want to send us some detailed information.
Now, to that point, where, if an implant is supposed to last 5 years, I thought I recalled Delta having a provision for their in-network providers where they have to honor the work that they do. Is that correct? At least with Delta.
That is correct. Again, plan to plan contract that could be different, but that's going to be covered by Delta Dental. Good question.
So going back to your question, you can contact Human Resources and say, who is my dental provider? Call the customer service number on the back of your card, or go to Human Resources and say, who can provide this additional assistance for me to research this? And again, they'll probably put you in contact with your account executive at Apex, and we can research that for you.
Okay. Thank you. As I talked earlier, we really try to stress you guys to going to an in-network provider. You're still going to have benefits out of network, but you're going to see significant cost savings when you see an in-network provider with your dental plan. So I showed you a couple exams here. I apologize, I may have to squint a little bit on this. But we're showing you what the preventative looks like on this first one. So an oral exam, cleaning, bite wing x-ray. You see the submitted charges, approved and allowed. The best part in the very far right column, you're going to see member pays 0. So if you go to an in-network provider, regardless of who your dental plan is, that should be covered at 100% for those preventative and diagnostic benefits. And then this number below, again, this could vary, but we just want to give you an example of if you visited a non-participating dentist, you are going to be paying out of pocket. And chances are, I almost think everybody in Indiana now is you're going to be balance billed for out of network. So you will see another fee that's owed, and dentist office will usually handle that up front when you go into a non-participating for a cleaning. But this just shows you that if you see a non-participating, you will be paying monies out of pocket for the out of network.
My understanding, a lot of dental plans that I see pay in what's called the 90th percentile of usual and customary.
Mm-hmm.
And the way I like to explain it is, if 90% of the dentists in a particular area charge $100 for a cleaning, and I go out of network and my dentist charges $110,
Mm-hmm.
I will most likely be balance billed $10. Is that a simplistic way of saying that?
It is correct. I know a lot of folks will get confused when they see 90th or 80th. They think that's a percentage of what the cost of that procedure is. But to Andy's point, that's going to represent the 90, 80th percent of those dentists are charging in that area. So that's a very good question.
So what the 90th percentile in an area with a zip code of 46240, it could be different, or will be different probably a little bit, than 46241.
Correct.
So the usual and customary doesn't always match up. And while we're talking about networks, can you explain a little bit, because I know that a lot of dental plans that I see are what we call blind PPOs or PPO networks.
Mm-hmm.
In network, out of network. And then I see other ones that include MAC plans, maximum allowable charges.
Yep.
Can you explain the difference between those two?
Yeah, so the plan that I showed earlier, this is going to be your traditional PPO plan. So the dentist we have a contract with the dentist. We're going to pay a set amount of fee. You know exactly what you're going to pay as an in-network dentist. On a MAC plan, that's going to be different. It's going to be that usual and customary charge. So you are going to pay a little bit higher on the MAC plan. PPO, in and out of network, you can still see. On a MAC plan, if you go out of network, you're going to get, I said for the lack of a better term, dinged. It's going to be a lot more expensive. So the PPO plan, you've got the freedom to see anyone. MAC plan, you've got to see an in-network dentist to see any type of benefit. And then there are some DHMOs. We don't see them prevalently a lot in Indiana. There are still some options out there. But with an HMO, similar to a MAC, you have to see an in-network provider to have coverage with the HMO side.
So a question that comes up sometimes, or maybe it's a rumor that I've heard, is that a lot of younger dentists new to the market, will join a lot of dental networks. And when they establish their practice, that's when they start dropping out of dental networks, because they have established practice and people, I feel, are more attached to the dentist, sometimes even more than the regular doctor. Is that why you don't see like 95% of dentists joining a network? Is it because they've already established that and they don't want to be told what to charge?
Yeah, we've seen it both ways. To your example,
Yeah.
that's exactly right. They've established their practice. But now we're seeing a lot of students come out of dental school and not join a network because they think they're going to make more monies not joining the network. So we've seen it both sides.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And one more question as it relates to the dental's office. I don't have a dental ID card, but when I go to the dentist's office, they don't ask me for it. They ask me who my dental insurance is with, and I
Correct.
tell them who it's with, and they can just process and find it. And what I've seen from other carriers, it almost feels like dental cards, different than medical ID cards, are going the way of the dodo.
Absolutely. I completely understand this, especially with Delta Dental, because we do not give out ID cards. There's a generic card that you can use, but the dental office, all they need is the dental provider and your social security number. They'll be able to look up you, your employees, or their dependents by that social security. I do get it. It still makes you feel warm and fuzzy when you have that ID
It
card.
does. It really does.
But you don't need it dental and or vision. It's just they don't need that ID card like they would with medical. Again, you could still print a generic card off. We just don't offer them. If you want to, we have paperless, but the dentist office will be able to look you up by social and along with your dependents as well.
Thank you, Tim.
Mm-hmm. Next, I'm sorry. Again, I don't want to dive too far into the weeds here, but Andy brought this up earlier. Delta Dental, our standard is we use our national out-of-network fee table. Our competitors use the 90th to 80th percentile. Again, we can spend some more time into this, but we look at the 80th and 90th. It can vary from carrier to carrier. So just when you're reviewing your contracts, when you're sitting down with Andy and the Apex team, just make sure you know how the out-of-network is being handled, because Delta Dental will do it differently than a Principal or a Guardian or MetLife. So just make sure you're spending some time with your consultant with Apex to really understand how the out-of-network is working.
Great. I will say I've seen a lot of dental plans that offer dual options where there's a MAC plan for one option
Mm-hmm.
that incentivizes the benefits in network for the MAC plan because they know it's going to be beneficial. And then at like 100, 90, 60.
Mm-hmm.
And then they offer the PPO plan at the same rate, but in and out of network, it's 100, 80, 50. In my experience, the risk of doing that is somebody doesn't show up to open enrollment and they don't understand that if you enroll in the MAC plan with the richer benefits, as you said earlier, you've got to go in network
Correct.
to take full advantage of that plan. Because if you go out of network on a MAC plan, it's reimbursing at the maximum allowable charge, which is significantly different than a 90th percentile.
You got it.
Okay.
So yeah, again, that boils down to the education piece, what you guys do at open enrollment. But you do have that one employee, or we all have amnesia. We forget about, oh, I forgot this plan. This is how it works. But again, I think it just boils down to that education that you all do with your employees. But it can't stress enough to push them through that education piece and make sure they understand the difference when you're offering a dual option.
Great. All right. Are there any questions at this time, Josh?
None additional so far.
Okay, so I'd like to add one other thing. It was interesting. So back in the day, I used to get silver fillings put in my teeth, and they're called amalgam fillings. It makes me feel like the metal they put on Wolverine's claws in the movie, but I don't think that's the same thing. I was asking my dentist, who I would say is a younger dentist, probably in his 40s, but he established his own practice. And I asked him, I was like, why don't you ever use amalgam? He kind of made a joke. He said, well, I'm younger to the game, and I think composite is primarily being used now. And I know that some dental plans will only cover composite fillings on your front teeth, posterior, right?
Yes.
And then they will only cover amalgam, but I believe Delta's standard is to cover composite on all teeth because that's what dentists are using now.
Correct. I kind of laughed earlier. Unless you're coming out of dental school from the 1960s, you're not going to have access to those materials. So Delta has made that standard. Again, just check your contract to confirm, but our back teeth with those fillings, that is going to be our standard offering.
I've also heard there's been a lot of having your teeth maintained, healthy dental hygiene is important to heart health.
Correct.
So that if you are at a higher risk of heart disease or you have heart disease, that some dental plans will include an additional cleaning outside the normal period. Is that correct?
There is. We've got a great disease management program where you have extra cleanings for those folks that are going to fall in those categories. So yes, I mean, diabetes, heart disease, you name it, the first thing is going through your mouth. So it is very important that you're doing the once at least, hopefully 2 cleanings a year, but that's a great point. So they will have those extra visits.
Gotcha. And there are also unique functions that I find that when you explain, some are easier for people to pick up than others. And some of those examples are, and I think Delta might be able to use both. There's maximum rollover,
Mm-hmm.
and then there's almost like a preventive max waiver. Can you cover those real quick?
Yeah. So on the diagnostic and preventative, I mentioned earlier, that does go towards your annual max. You do have the ability to exclude your diagnostic and preventative from the annual max. And what that does is that frees up anywhere from $200 to $400 per covered member to use on your basic and major services. And you're able to use that year. So the rollover, which is obviously, that's another great benefit. It's usually $1,000 max when you can roll over $500. So if you go in for your preventative and diagnostic services, the dental plan will roll over monies that you can use in that following year. The only downside I see in that is the folks that are going in for the preventative and diagnostic generally aren't going to see those basic and major
Because they're having their teeth maintained.
Correct. So the exclusion of the preventative and diagnostic is available up front and ready for you. The rollover is not available to that following year. Still an awesome benefit, but again, it's giving to those folks that are going to the dentist for their annual and their every 6 months their cleanings. Answer your question?
Yep, that was really good. I would say, any other questions pop up, Josh? So no other questions this time. So if you have additional questions, you can always call the number on the back of your ID card. For clients of Apex Benefits, they can reach out to Human Resources, and sometimes when we perform open enrollment meetings, you might have our direct contact information. We're helping to research that information. I believe you do have some questions.
Yeah, 2 more questions. So the first is, do you cover the oral sleeping appliance night guard that is made by the dentist? They're very expensive.
So the question is, do dental plans cover the oral night guard,
The occlusal guards.
the occlusal guards that are created by the dentist?
Yes, we do. Again, you're just going to see this in not only Delta Dental's plans. We used to cover this only once per lifetime. We've now changed that to once per 5 years. Again, go back to check which dental plan, what the coverage looks like in that. But generally, those are going to cover at least an occlusal guard. But we are doing that once every 5 years. It's a good question.
Is that to keep your teeth from grinding?
It is.
Okay.
I think some snoring, grinding, you name it.
Okay. Excellent. What's the other question,
And the other
Josh?
question is, how does dental insurance work when you have 2 different plans? I have coverage under my employer and through my husband's pension. Which is considered the primary? Can that be changed?
So the question
That's
was,
a great question.
we talked about this earlier. The question was having multiple benefits. So you're covered underneath your spouse's plan. And then I can follow up with if they have dependent children on that plan too. Your employer is going to be primary. So again, that goes back to the estimation of benefits. Make sure you're checking with the dentist's office. Say, hey, I've got 2 plans. I'm covered with ABC company, and then my husband's pension plan is over here. So they will look at the benefits, and then yours will be primary, his or hers will be secondary. And then for children, hope I don't completely confuse you, I think this works the same way in medical. There's a thing called the birthday rule. So if you've got both dependents covered underneath your plan and your spouse's plan, if they go in for coverage, again, they'll do that predetermination and estimation of benefits. The employer, the spouse with the next birthday, so the next in line, the children's benefits would fall underneath that plan. So the birthday rule comes into play. So I'm not sure if there's questions around that,
So
but
the follow-up question is it even beneficial to carry more than one dental coverage?
I think so. It's all going to depend on what you're wanting to pay for the premium that comes out of your paycheck. But to have that coordination of benefits, it does give you a little bit more.
Depends on what you're paying in premium is part of the answer to that.
Yeah, and then do I dive into the health savings accounts? I mean, if you've got an HSA with your medical plan, you can also use those dollars to pay for dental expenses. So that helps offset some of that. I think it works both ways. Again, it just depends on what you're willing to take out of that payroll deduction to pay for that premium.
In my experience, having dual coverage if you're paying a contribution for both plans. I have not seen the benefit in that. But again, if it's a retiree plan and it's a really rich, even if it's secondary, really rich dental plan, you might want to keep it in case you lose it.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't know all the particulars with it. There's a lot to evaluate with that. Okay, any other questions at this time? Thank you for the great questions that you submitted in. Tim, thank you very much for coming in today. I appreciate you taking time off. And
Very welcome.
Yeah.
Thank you all. Appreciate it.
go Pacers.
Go Pacers.